I stood on the edge of the dock, staring out at the sleek, white shape cutting an eerie silhouette against the morning mist. The Horizon. That was its name. A luxury yacht that once belonged to Jasper Harrington, a reclusive billionaire who had made his fortune in oil, tech, and whatever other industries billionaires seem to have their hands in. Days ago, Harrington vanished. Now his prized vessel floated into harbor with no passengers, no crew, just silence. Quite the story, huh? A voice broke through my thoughts. It was Detective Sheila Klein, leaning against the railing of the police launch that brought us out here. Her gaze was fixed on the massive yacht as we drifted closer. Rich man disappears into thin air, and his ghost ship sails home. That'll sell headlines, Ford. She had a point. As an investigative journalist, stories like this were gold. The public ate up anything with a whiff of mystery, and Harrington's disappearance was pure enigma. But I wasn't here for gossip columns. I was here for answers. Billionaires don't just disappear, I said, pocketing my notepad. They vanish for a reason. The yacht loomed closer, its exterior gleaming under the pale sun, as if mocking the absence of life aboard. For a vessel worth more than most people would see in a lifetime, it was unsettlingly quiet. Not even the hum of an engine or the creak of wood, just silence. We boarded cautiously. Sheila had her team, gloves on, boots clanking across the pristine deck as they split up to investigate. I followed her into the main cabin. Inside, the Horizon was a palace on water, a sleek bar lined with crystal glasses, plush leather sofas arranged perfectly. A polished chessboard lay in the middle of a game, Black King under check. The place was immaculate. "This doesn't feel right," I muttered, trailing a finger across a marble countertop. "Where's the chaos? If something went wrong out here, you'd expect, I don't know, signs of it." Sheila nodded grimly. "It's like they tidied up before they left." We pressed deeper into the yacht. Each cabin we checked was empty but spotless. Beds made, no luggage, no signs of anyone having been there for days. And that's when Sheila found the first clue. "Ford!" she called. I followed her voice to the yacht's bridge. She pointed to the communications console. "Satellite link, disabled manually." I frowned. Sabotage? More like a deliberate blackout. Someone didn't want this boat sending out any signals. My stomach turned. Jasper Harrington was a man who surrounded himself with control, money, power, technology. Cutting comms? That wasn't random. It was planned. Then we hit the engine room. The moment Sheila swung the hatch open, a sickly metallic scent filled the air. She froze. "Blood," she said quietly. There, pooled across the floor beneath the massive turbines, was a dark stain, fresh enough to suggest something terrible had happened not long ago. Sheila knelt down with a flashlight, gloved fingers brushing the edge of the pool. "This isn't old," she said. "Whoever bled here, it wasn't days ago." I felt the hairs on my neck prickle. It wasn't the blood that bothered me. It was the silence surrounding it. "There's no sign of a struggle anywhere else," I said. "It's like someone cleaned up, everywhere except here." Sheila rose, her expression unreadable. "You think this was staged?" "Or it's a message," I replied. "Something went down on this boat, Sheila. Someone made sure the yacht came home. But why bring it back?" Her radio crackled, and she called in forensics. I walked back up to the deck, staring out at the endless stretch of ocean. Somewhere out there, Jasper Harrington was either dead, hiding, or playing a game no one else knew the rules to. I turned to Sheila as she climbed back up. "What's your gut telling you?" she asked. I exhaled slowly. That Harrington knew something was coming. This yacht is bait. Someone wanted it found. And as I looked again at the perfect chess game, I realized something chilling. Harrington hadn't lost the game yet, but someone had him in check. The forensics team arrived an hour later, turning the Horizon into a crime scene. I watched as gloved hands swabbed, scanned, and dusted, searching for the faintest trace of life or death aboard the yacht. From the deck, Sheila Klein stood with her arms crossed, barking orders into her radio, while I sifted through the details in my head. A pool of blood, a disabled communication link, a ghost ship returned to port. None of it fit together cleanly, and that gnawed at me. I'd covered enough high-profile cases to know that when billionaires vanished, it wasn't by accident. It was deliberate. "Ford!" Sheila shouted, snapping me out of my thoughts. "You'll want to see this." I hurried below deck, my boots echoing off the pristine floors. Sheila led me back to the cabin where the chessboard lay frozen mid-game. Her forensic techs were kneeling beside the polished mahogany table, holding a black light. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the chess pieces. Under the black light, faint fingerprints glowed along the edges of the pieces, prints that had been deliberately wiped clean, but not perfectly. "Somebody was playing," I muttered. "More like performing," Sheila replied. "These weren't ordinary prints. They've been smudged and smeared intentionally, almost like they wanted to show us someone was here without telling us who." I studied the board closely, the black king sitting in check. Chess is symbolic. If Harrington was the king, maybe this setup is someone's way of saying they've trapped him. Sheila arched a brow. "A power play, or a warning." One of the techs, a wiry guy named Ridley, cleared his throat. Detective? We found something else." Ridley held up a small slip of paper, folded neatly, tucked under the velvet edge of the chessboard. Sheila grabbed a pair of tweezers and carefully unfolded it. My pulse quickened as I leaned closer, the paper revealing a single typewritten line. "You're searching for a ghost. The king has already fallen." A chill ran down my spine. Someone wanted this found. Sheila nodded, her face grim. "Which means they're watching us right now." By mid-afternoon, news of the yacht's return had broken wide open. Reporters lined the docks, cameras flashing as the police escorted me back to solid ground. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, unseen figures lurking just beyond view. Harrington's disappearance was no longer just a mystery, it was a spectacle. I ducked away from the mob, finding a corner of the dock where I could think. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ford," a voice whispered. The tone was mechanical, distorted beyond recognition. "Stop asking questions." I tensed. "Who is this?" The voice ignored me. "The king fell because he gambled with the wrong pieces. If you keep playing, you'll lose too." The call went dead. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Someone knew I was involved. But who? And why was Harrington's yacht a pawn in whatever twisted game was playing out? That night I sat at my desk, papers and photographs scattered across the surface. Jasper Harrington's face stared back at me from a dozen clippings. Charity galas, corporate takeovers, smiling at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The man had built empires, but in every photo, his eyes told a different story. Paranoia. Harrington wasn't just wealthy, he was careful, a control freak. That yacht, the Horizon, was his safe haven. If he abandoned it, or worse, had it sent back, there had to be a reason. I mapped out a timeline. 2 weeks ago, Harrington had vanished while sailing from Gibraltar to Lisbon. No distress signals, no records of contact, just the yacht returning, days later, drifting off course. I jotted down questions in my notebook. Who disabled the satellite link? Whose blood was in the engine room? Why stage the chess game? Each answer only led to more possibilities, none of them comforting. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I hesitated but answered. This time the voice was clearer. It wasn't distorted, but it was calm, controlled. "Mr. Ford," the man said, polite as a dinner guest, "you're asking all the wrong questions." I swallowed. "Who are you?" "Think bigger. The yacht wasn't a message. It's an invitation." "What do you mean?" The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief. An invitation? For what? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the wall as a terrifying thought crystallized in my mind. Someone, whoever was pulling the strings, wanted me to play along. The yacht was just the first move in a much bigger game, and if I didn't figure out the rules soon, I'd end up just like Harrington, another ghost on the water. The next morning, I couldn't shake the words. The yacht wasn't a message, it's an invitation. The phrase gnawed at me like a parasite. The kind of people who sent cryptic messages like that didn't waste time. They played for keeps. I was back at the dock by dawn, staring at the horizon as it loomed against the gray waterline. The yacht, once a symbol of wealth and luxury, now seemed cursed. Sheila joined me, her hair pulled into a tight ponytail, a coffee clutched in one hand. "You look like hell," she muttered, handing me the cup. "Sleep at all?" "Not really," I admitted. "Whoever called me last night wasn't bluffing. They know more than we do." Sheila frowned. "You tell me you didn't follow some anonymous lead?" "Not yet," I said, "but I have to go back on board." She hesitated, searching my face. "Ford, we already swept the yacht top to bottom. What do you expect to find?" I glanced at the horizon. The invitation. We boarded again, the two of us moving through the ship's stillness like intruders. Everything was pristine, yet cold, like a perfect facade hiding a rot underneath. I started in the galley while Sheila checked the master bedroom again. Something was bothering me about the engine room. The blood. It wasn't smeared, and there were no signs of struggle nearby. Someone had placed it there. Like the chessboard, it was deliberate. Kneeling down near the dark stains, I looked closer. The forensics team had collected samples, but the edges of the blood had congealed oddly, almost as if they were trying to dry faster. I pulled on gloves and carefully pried a nearby floor grate open. Something small was tucked inside, a sleek black keycard. No logo, no identifying markers, just blank plastic with a thin magnetic strip. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself. "You find something?" Sheila's voice startled me. "Yeah." I stood, holding up the card. "Somebody didn't want this seen." Sheila's face darkened. "Could be for a secured room? A vault? Maybe something Harrington hid. Or it's for wherever this invitation is leading me." She groaned. "Ford, you're not seriously thinking." "I'm already in too deep." I spent hours trying to decode the key card. I scanned it, cross-referenced signals, but nothing came up. Whoever designed it wanted it untraceable. But late that afternoon, as I sat at my desk surrounded by maps and files, my email dinged. "Unknown sender. Welcome to the next move." Attached was a set of coordinates and a time. 41 degrees, 8 minutes, 57 seconds north, 9 degrees, 7 minutes, 20 seconds east. Midnight. I ran the location. It was a remote section of sea just off the coast of Sardinia. Sheila wasn't thrilled when I told her. "You think it's smart to show up at a random ocean coordinate in the dead of night?" "Ford, this reeks of a trap." "It might be," I admitted, "but Harrington's playing field wasn't just yachts and boardrooms. If he set this up, or if someone's using his disappearance to send a message, it's my only lead." She stared at me for a long moment before sighing. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," I said firmly. "I need someone on the outside. If I don't check back in by morning, send everything we have to Interpol." "You're an idiot," she snapped, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Maybe," I muttered, "but somebody invited me. I'm going to see what the game's about." That night, as I sailed toward the coordinates on a small rented boat, the world seemed unnaturally still. The moon cast silvery reflections over the water, and the sound of the waves was rhythmic but distant. I'd shut off my boat's lights as I neared the location, wary of being spotted before I was ready. 41 degrees, 8 minutes, 57 seconds north, 9 degrees, 7 minutes, 20 seconds east. The GPS chimed softly, indicating I'd arrived. The spot looked like any other stretch of ocean, empty and quiet, but I knew better than to trust appearances. I killed the engine and grabbed my flashlight, scanning the water. For several minutes, there was nothing, just the eerie silence of the sea. Then I saw it, a faint light glowing just below the surface. I leaned over the edge of the boat, shining my flashlight into the water. There, about 20 feet down, I spotted it, a submerged container, partially camouflaged to look like rock and coral, a submersible drop. My pulse spiked. Somebody had left something here on purpose. The key card, the coordinates. This was the next step. I suited up in scuba gear I'd brought just in case. I could hear Sheila's voice in my head calling me reckless, but curiosity outweighed caution. I plunged into the water, the cold biting through my wetsuit as I swam downward. The container came into sharper focus as I neared it. Large, steel, bolted shut. When I got closer, I found a slot on its surface, perfectly shaped for the key card. With shaking hands, I slid the card in. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lock released with a mechanical clunk. The front of the container slowly hinged open, releasing a stream of bubbles. I hesitated before shining my light inside. My breath caught. Inside the container were dozens of waterproof cases stacked neatly. Each one had a label, Phase 2. And in the corner of the container, taped carefully, was another note, Play your part or everything sinks. I surfaced and hauled myself back onto the boat, water streaming from my suit as I tore off the mask. My heart thundered in my chest as I tried to process what I'd just seen. Play your part or everything sinks. I stared back at the water as if expecting the container to suddenly vanish. What the hell was Phase 2? Who left it there? And why was I the one holding the key to this madness? I fired up the engine, my fingers shaking on the throttle, and sped back to shore. Every sound, the waves, the wind, the hum of the motor, felt amplified. My mind replayed the underwater scene, the locked cases, the note. Someone wanted this found, and I was being dragged deeper into their scheme. Back in my rented room near the harbor, I spread my gear on the bed. The blank key card, coordinates, and that message burned into my mind. I showered and tried to calm down, but I couldn't sleep. My gut told me that whoever orchestrated this knew exactly what they were doing, and I was running out of time to figure it out. I grabbed my phone and called Sheila. "What now?" she answered, half asleep. "Listen to me carefully," I said. "The key card led me to a drop site underwater, a sealed container. It's labeled Phase 2, and there are cases inside." Sheila swore under her breath. "What's in the cases?" "I don't know. I didn't open them yet. But there's a note. Play your part or everything sinks." There was a long pause. "Ford, you realize this is bigger than Harrington now, right? This sounds like an operation." "I know," I said. "But an operation for what?" "You need to bring this to the authorities." I laughed bitterly. "And tell them what?" "That I followed a trail of anonymous clues into the middle of the ocean? That I found Phase 2 of, what, some international conspiracy? They'd think I'm insane." Sheila sighed. "Then what's your plan?" "I need to open one of those cases. I have to know what's inside." She hesitated. "You're walking a dangerous line, Ford. Whatever this is, you're playing their game. I don't see another choice." I rented a small storage unit on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes. With the help of a pry bar and a bit of sweat, I forced one of the waterproof cases open. What I found inside froze me to the core. Bundles of pristine $100 bills, tightly packed and secured. Each case likely held millions. But the money wasn't the only thing. Tucked at the bottom was a flash drive with a label. Phase 2 protocols. I grabbed my laptop and plugged it in, half expecting some kind of virus. But the contents were straightforward. Folders full of financial data, offshore account numbers, and schematics for international money transfers. Someone, Harrington or the people who took him, was moving obscene amounts of money. But the worst part? The name of my company appeared in the files. My own name, attached to transfers I'd never seen before. I pushed the laptop away like it burned me. No, no. Whoever set this up was framing me. My fingerprints were all over this thing, and now that I'd opened it, I was the one holding the evidence. My mind raced. Harrington wasn't just missing. He was at the center of something massive. Money laundering, smuggling. And now I was his fall guy. Play your part or everything sinks. I leaned back in the chair, my pulse drumming in my ears. If I didn't play along, they'd let this trail of evidence bury me alive. But if I did, I was trapped. I spent the rest of the night staring at the flash drive. Sleep was out of the question. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became. Harrington had been shifting money for years, but something had gone wrong. Maybe someone else got greedy. Maybe Harrington had turned on his partners. Either way, I was being pushed into the spotlight. As dawn broke, I made up my mind. If this was a game, I needed to start playing it on my terms. I called Sheila. "I need your help," I said. She didn't sound surprised. "What now?" "There's something bigger going on here, and I can't prove it alone. Someone's trying to pin this on me." "What do you need?" "I need to meet one of Harrington's offshore contacts, Someone's moving this money and they'll know why. You're insane, Sheila said, but I could hear the wheels turning in her mind. Fine, I'll pull what strings I can, but you owe me. Always. By evening, Sheila had worked her magic. I had a name in a meeting. Luka Markovic, a facilitator based in Montenegro. If anyone could explain Harrington's mess, it was him. I packed light, just the flash drive, some cash, and the clothes on my back. Before leaving, I made a call to a contact of my own, one of my sources from my days as an investigative journalist. I'm emailing you everything I found, I told him. If anything happens to me, get it out there. You in trouble, Ford? Not yet, I said, but we both knew I was lying. At the airport, I checked my surroundings obsessively. Every face in the crowd looked like a potential threat. When I finally boarded the plane, I sank into my seat, gripping the flash drive like a lifeline. The pieces were falling into place, but the deeper I went, the clearer it became. Someone didn't want this story getting out. And if I didn't play my part, everything might sink. The plane's engines roared to life, and as we ascended into the night sky, I stared out the window, wondering if I'd just boarded a one-way trip into the abyss. The air in Montenegro felt thick, laced with the tang of salt and something darker I couldn't name. Kotor's labyrinth of cobblestone streets twisted like the secrets I was chasing. I stayed paranoid, pulling my baseball cap low, making sure no one was tailing me. I'd arranged to meet Luka Markovic in a rundown bar just outside the city, a place where prying eyes and honest men rarely ventured. I'd done my homework on Luka. He wasn't a man to cross lightly. Born into smuggling, he'd made a name for himself laundering money for oligarchs and traffickers. A facilitator was the polite term for his work, but everyone knew he was dangerous. If Luka was involved in Harrington's mess, this entire ordeal ran far deeper than offshore accounts. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with stale beer and sweat, the kind of place where violence lived just under the surface. Luka sat at a back table, flanked by two bruisers who looked like they bench-pressed pickup trucks for fun. I approached, trying to look casual despite the pit in my stomach. Luka was exactly what I expected. Sharp suit, slicked back hair, a predator's calm. He watched me like a cat studying a cornered mouse. Ford, isn't it? His voice had a faint Eastern European lilt. Sit. I've been expecting you. I hesitated, then slid into the chair across from him. I didn't think I was that predictable. You aren't, Luka said, tapping his glass of whiskey. But Harrington? He was predictable. And so are the people cleaning up his mess. My heart skipped a beat. Cleaning up? Luka smiled thinly, as if I'd amused him. Do you think Harrington vanished on his own? Or that you stumbled onto this by accident? I don't believe in coincidences, I said, masking my growing unease. Good, because you are being watched, Ford. Every step you take, every question you ask, it's all been accounted for. Then why agree to meet me? I pushed back, leaning forward. What do you get out of this? Luka chuckled, swirling his whiskey. Because I find it entertaining. You're chasing ghosts. Harrington played a dangerous game with very real people, and you've walked straight into their web. What game? Luka's expression hardened. Money, Ford. Enough to make entire governments kneel. But this isn't just about offshore accounts or stolen billions. Harrington was a middleman for something bigger. He let the words hang, baiting me to ask. Bigger than what? Luka finished his drink and stood. That's all I'll say. Go home, Ford. You're in over your head and you won't like what you find. He turned to leave, his bodyguard shadowing him. Panic clawed at me. I couldn't let him just walk away. Wait, I shouted, loud enough for the bar to quiet. What about phase 2? Luka froze mid-step. Slowly he turned his head to look at me, his expression unreadable. You really should stop digging, he said quietly, because if you don't, phase 2 will come for you. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving me rattled and angry. Back in my rented room, I paced, replaying Luka's words in my head. Phase 2 will come for you. Harrington hadn't just vanished, he'd been silenced. I was sure of it now, and whoever was pulling the strings wasn't content to let me keep snooping around. I sat at the desk and opened the flash drive again, scrolling through the files I'd unearthed. Offshore accounts, shell companies. There had to be a pattern, A name, something to connect the dots. My gut told me Luca was right. Harrington had stumbled onto something far larger than himself. At around midnight, my laptop buzzed with an alert. Sheila, I answered, my pulse spiking. Ford, listen to me carefully, she said. I don't know what you're mixed up in, but I ran some of those account numbers. They're linked to defense contractors, arms dealers. And the transfers? They're recent. Some of them are still active. I sat down hard. You're telling me Harrington was tied to weapons deals? That's what it looks like. He was a facilitator, Ford, moving money between clients who didn't want to be seen. But here's the kicker. Some of these transfers stopped the day he disappeared. Someone had pulled the plug. My mind raced. Sheila, can you trace where the last transfers were sent? I'm working on it, but whoever set this up knew what they were doing. It's like chasing smoke. Keep digging, I said. Send me whatever you find. Ford? Sheila hesitated. This is dangerous. If someone's covering this up, they'll come after you. I know, I muttered, but I can't stop now. Sleep didn't come. I stared out the window, the dark streets of Kotor sprawling beneath me. Luca's warning echoed in my head. I'd stirred a hornet's nest, and now I could feel the eyes on me, unseen but undeniable. When the sun rose, my phone buzzed with another message, an unknown number. Final warning, turn back now, or you won't make it home. The pieces were coming together, but so was the noose around my neck. Whoever phase 2 was, they weren't bluffing. I grabbed my bag, stuffed the flash drive inside, and headed for the airport. If I was going to get answers, I needed to go where the trail ended, straight into the belly of the beast. Wherever Harrington's final transaction led, I'd be there. And I had a sinking feeling I wasn't going to like what I found. The flight to Geneva was long, but sleep still eluded me. I spent the hours sifting through every document on the flash drive, trying to predict what I'd walk into. Harrington's final transfers had all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Hundreds of millions moved through Swiss accounts linked to shadowy defense contractors, flag corporations, and companies that existed only on paper. Someone had scrubbed clean what little remained, but a handful of names surfaced again and again. One caught my eye. Zorn Industries. I knew the name. They were a global defense supplier, infamous for their dealings in the gray zone, places where the line between wars and business blurred into profit margins. If Harrington had been funneling money to Zorn, that meant this wasn't just dirty money or illicit deals. It was weapons, power, and influence, sold to whoever could pay the price. The cab from the Geneva airport dropped me outside an unassuming office building near Lake Lemon, the kind of modern, soulless glass box that screamed discretion. Zorn Industries had a branch here, not its main headquarters. That was hidden behind miles of security somewhere outside Zurich. But this satellite office handled financial transfers. I stood across the street, watching men in sharp suits enter and exit, wondering how many of them knew the blood their deals had funded. My gut churned. I wasn't a spy or an investigator. I was just a journalist with a chip on his shoulder and a trail of bad decisions behind him. But the deeper I went, the more Harrington's disappearance smelled like something much darker, a cleanup operation. I crossed the street and walked straight through the front door. Bold, reckless, stupid, all true. But I had one thing going for me, Harrington's name. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist, a blonde woman in her 30s with an expression carved from stone, barely looked up from her desk. I glanced around the lobby, minimalist decor, security cameras tucked into the corners, a pair of guards stationed near the elevators. Tell Mr. Kern that Ford Bennett is here, I said, playing the only card I had. The receptionist finally looked up, her expression flickering with surprise before her mask slipped back into place. Mr. Kern isn't available to... Tell him, I repeated firmly. He'll want to hear what I have to say. She hesitated, then picked up the phone and muttered something into the receiver. 30 tense seconds later, she motioned toward the elevators. Second floor, room 207. The man waiting for me in room 207 wasn't what I expected. Aaron Kern was lean, mid-40s, with silver hair and an expensive suit that hung on him like armor. He sat behind a large desk with his fingers steepled, watching me enter as if he already knew everything about me. Ford Bennett, Kern said smoothly. I've been expecting you. I froze mid-step. Expecting me? Kern smiled faintly, though it never touched his eyes. You've been asking the wrong people the right questions, and now, here you are. I felt a chill, my earlier bravado crumbling. What do you know about Harrington? Kern tilted his head. Harrington. Oh, I think you already know. He overstepped. He thought he could play broker for powers far beyond his control. And what about phase two? I pushed, my voice hardening. Kern's smile vanished. He stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Phase two isn't what you think, Mr. Bennett. It's not a person or a plan. It's a principle. When someone becomes a liability, they are dealt with. Permanently. I swallowed hard. So that's what happened to Harrington? Kern turned back to me, his expression cold. Harrington understood the risks. He made his choices. Now I suggest you stop making the same mistake. Why? I demanded. What are you hiding? Nothing that concerns you, Kern said. But let me make this clear. You've seen too much. Go home, Ford. Walk away while you still can. I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could speak, two men in suits entered the room behind me, their posture unmistakably threatening. Kern smiled again, this time a predator's grin. My associates will show you out. The two men didn't speak as they escorted me to the lobby. I could feel their presence like shadows at my back. When we reached the door, one of them leaned close. Next time, we won't be so polite. I stumbled onto the street, my heart hammering. Kern had practically confirmed Harrington's fate without saying the words, but it wasn't enough. I needed hard proof, something that tied Zorn Industries, Kern, and Harrington's disappearance together. That night, I holed up in a cheap hotel room, paranoia gnawing at me. I double-checked every lock, every curtain, every shadow. My laptop screen glowed as I pored over the flash drive, looking for something I'd missed. And then I found it. Buried in the files was a single encrypted folder titled Sparrow. It was out of place among the numbered accounts and company names, and my gut told me it was the key to everything. After 2 hours of hacking, I finally cracked it. The folder contained logs, names, dates, shipments, and at the bottom a single audio file labeled Phase 2 Execution.mp3. With shaking hands, I pressed play. Static crackled before a voice came through, calm and deliberate. It wasn't Harrington. Phase 2 begins in 48 hours. Ensure no loose ends remain. The recording ended abruptly, but its message was clear. Loose ends. I was one of them. The weight of the recording hung heavy on me. Ensure no loose ends remain. That chilling phrase played on repeat in my mind as I paced the dingy hotel room. If Phase 2 was set to begin in 48 hours, I had less than 2 days to figure out exactly what it was, and how deep Harrington had fallen into this nightmare before he disappeared. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Kern's power reached far beyond Zorn Industries. His tentacles had a grip on politics, finance, and law enforcement. My only real option was to get the truth out into the open. But to do that, I needed solid proof, and I needed someone who could help me expose it. That's when I thought of her. Elena Chavez. Elena was one of the last few honest journalists I knew. We'd worked together years ago on an expose about political corruption in South America. She'd risked her life for the story, and her instincts had saved mine more than once. If anyone could help me untangle this mess and survive the fallout, it was her. I dug out my burner phone and dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. Ford? Her voice was sharp, suspicious. Why are you calling me at, 2 a.m.? I thought you were done with chasing ghosts. I don't have time for pleasantries, Elena. I've got something huge and I need your help. A pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. What kind of something? A missing billionaire, a global defense contractor, and something called Phase 2. She exhaled sharply. Where are you? Geneva. I need you to meet me here. Immediately. I'll send you the details. You sound desperate, Ford. I am. The next morning, I met Elena in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. She was exactly as I remembered. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, dressed in a leather jacket that had seen more action than most soldiers. She slid into the seat across from me, dropping her bag on the table. You look like hell, she said bluntly, stirring a cappuccino she hadn't ordered. Nice to see you too, Elena. I handed her a USB drive containing the evidence. Start with this. She plugged the drive into her laptop and scanned the files with practice speed. Her brow furrowed when she reached the logs and audio file. Zorn Industries, she muttered. These guys are bad news, you know that, right? If this leaks, they'll come for you. They already are, I said grimly. Kern knows I'm digging. He warned me to walk away. She looked up sharply. And you didn't? I shook my head. Not my style. Elena leaned back, assessing me. What's your endgame, Ford? I need to know what Phase 2 is. Whatever Harrington got himself into, it's bigger than him. I think he tried to stop it, or expose it, and that's why he disappeared. And what do you want me to do? Help me get this story out. Expose Kern, Zorn, all of it. But first, we need to figure out what's happening in 48 hours. Elena considered this, then nodded. Okay, but we're going to need more than some files and a voice recording. We need boots-on-the-ground proof. By midday, we tracked down a lead. One of the companies tied to the offshore accounts, Roskin Shipping, had a major warehouse near Geneva. According to the logs, shipments flagged under Phase 2 had been moving through that location. If there was a smoking gun, we'd find it there. We rented a beat-up sedan and parked half a mile from the warehouse under the cover of trees. Through binoculars, I watched trucks pulling in and out of the massive complex. The place was crawling with security. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, while cameras tracked every movement. This isn't some storage facility, Elena whispered, crouching beside me. This is a fortress. I nodded grimly. They're hiding something. And whatever it is, it's moving soon. What's the plan? Get inside. Find proof. Get out. She stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. And how do you plan to do that? Walk in with a clipboard and pretend you belong? Something like that, I said, pulling a reflective vest and ID badge out of my bag. These places rely on routine. I've worked docks before. You blend in, act like you're supposed to be there, and no one questions you. Elena didn't look convinced, but she grabbed the spare vest. Fine, but if this goes south, I'm blaming you. The warehouse was massive, a labyrinth of crates, forklifts, and automated systems humming with precision. Elena and I split up, moving in separate directions. I kept my head down, nodding to workers as I passed. No one gave me a second glance. I scanned labels as I moved. Most were innocuous enough. Food supplies, machinery, electronics. But then I saw it. A crate marked Phase 2, Priority Transport. My pulse quickened. I crouched beside the crate, flipping out my multi-tool to pry it open. Inside, stacked in rows like macabre trophies, were weapons, military-grade assault rifles, explosives, and crates of ammunition. I stared in horror, realizing what Zorn had been orchestrating. This wasn't about money or power alone. It was about arming conflicts, toppling governments, and creating chaos, all funded through Harrington's missing millions. I snapped photos, my hands shaking. Ford! Elena's voice crackled in my earpiece. You need to get out, now. What's wrong? I whispered. They know we're here. I saw guards moving towards your location. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I tucked my phone back into my pocket and resealed the crate. I'm moving! But as I turned the corner, I came face to face with 3 guards. Stop! One of them barked, raising his weapon. Run, Ford! Elena screamed in my earpiece. I bolted, adrenaline surging through me as bullets ricocheted off metal beams. I ducked behind crates, weaving through the labyrinth as alarms blared. My mind raced. If I didn't make it out, this whole thing died with me. At the far end of the warehouse, I spotted an emergency exit. I sprinted for it, my lungs burning, the sound of footsteps closing in behind me. I slammed into the door and burst into the sunlight, stumbling into the trees. Elena was waiting by the car. Move! She shouted, throwing open the passenger door. I dove in as she hit the gas, tires kicking up dirt and gravel. The guards burst from the exit just as we sped out of sight. Elena glanced at me, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Did you get it? I held up my phone, still panting. I got it, but it wasn't over. Not yet.